thyroid optimization gets a bad rap because a lot of the time people get put on T4 monotherapy, which is useless or it can make problems worse.
The two feel-good hormones are testosterone and thyroid predominantly, and that those are the ones that have the greatest impact on how you feel, function, perform, and your overall health on a daily basis are those two. Those are the biggies. So thyroid is probably the most controversial one of them all. It's the one that creates ire with the family physician or internist because it is poorly understood, just like testosterone has been for several decades. And I think what men need to understand out there is many men out there that get on testosterone and still have symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, lack of mental clarity, weight gain, inability to lose weight, even erectile dysfunction, things such as that. A lot of times those symptoms are from thyroid. So low acting thyroid in a man looks just like low acting testosterone in many areas. And that's why they don't get better when they just get testosterone in some instances, because the clinic is throwing testosterone, which is actually also a thyroid problem. So that's why, but what I found, Dave, in my practice is I used to teach about thyroid right off the bat, about optimizing levels in men. Understand that thyroid regulates temperature, metabolism, cerebral function, and energy levels. It protects you against cardiovascular disease, cognitive impairment, fatigue, weight gain, memory loss, decreases visceral body fat, and improves your lipid profiles. The better the levels, just like with testosterone, the better the benefits. So I used to preach to the men that all the wonderful benefits of having optimal levels of thyroid, just like having optimal levels of testosterone. They can always understand testosterone, but inevitably they would call back a month or two later. Many of them, why am I taking this thyroid again? I don't want to take it anymore. I just want to take my testosterone. Then they'll stop and they'll start feeling bad or whatever. And maybe they won't start feeling bad. But the point is, then their thyroid labs are not optimal anymore, because that's what hormone optimization is about, is maintaining optimal levels. And so what I have found that works recently best with men is men tend to typically do, most of them, not all of them. Some of them understand hormone optimization after 40. But what I found, Dave, is that it works best in them as far as them accepting it and understanding it. If I start it after I start testosterone and the other hormones, get everything optimal, give it time to work, and then if they have symptoms left over, still have persistent fatigue, brain fog, lack of then they'll start thyroid, and they tend to do much better when they know exactly the symptoms they're starting it for versus starting it and optimizing the levels and not waiting until you get symptoms of a deficiency. So if in a perfect world, if I went back to age 40, I would start all my hormones. Whether I had symptoms or not, I would start all my hormones. I maintain I had optimal levels. I would never want them to be anything but optimal. And that's Neil Rizier's perfect world too. And so that would be our perfect world, but we don't live in that perfect world. So that's kind of my approach to thyroid. It's a vitally important hormone. The two feel-good hormones are testosterone and thyroid predominantly, and that those are the ones that have the greatest impact on how you feel, function, perform, and your overall health on a daily basis are those two. Those are the biggies. And so, Dave, you can tell us how you approach, consulting men on thyroid, but that's kind of the approach that I've taken after doing that for so long, is I tend to get everything optimal first and then add thyroid. I kind of put it on deck for them, unless they want to start it off bad. They're given the opportunity, as every man is, just like with testosterone. They can not do it, optimize it from the beginning, or just wait and start it later. There's no wrong answer for that man. Whatever his answer is his answer. Okay. So tell us how you approach that in your practice.
Okay. Yeah. So thyroid's a big one. Thyroid is also common in younger guys as well. Again, I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune. I think there's also an endocrine disruption that plays into that too.
Military men especially bad. Oh, go ahead.
The thing that I've also found is it's really rampant in the UK. Maybe it's something to do with the pollution, weather, I don't know, but very rampant over there. So yeah, if you take a list, if we imagine a Venn diagram that crosses over in the middle, and you've got low testosterone symptoms on the side and you've got thyroid symptoms on one side, they're all in the middle. They're the same. They are the same.
Guys, if you understand that, they're the same.
They're the same. And this idea that if you have to have like cold extremities to be hypothyroid, that's nonsense.
That's true.
That's nonsense. I believe that maybe came from the fact that women run a little bit lower in temperature than men. So maybe that's the first symptom they notice, but no.
They always have to describe the extremes. The extreme of true hypothyroidism. We're not talking about subclinical hypothyroidism or men with suboptimal thyroid levels. We're talking about those true hypothyroid and hyperthyroid. So yeah, that's where that kind of comes from.
Yeah. So when it comes to the thyroid, and you've said this before, like when you draw a line in the sand, let's say hypothetically a free testosterone level of 50, and if you're still wanting to throw more testosterone at it, the chances are there's something else going on, and the chances are if it's clinical hypogonadism symptoms with optimal testosterone levels, it's thyroid, but that should have already been checked and taken care of. But a lot of the time it's not when they come to people like us
That's
because it
right.
gets overlooked all the time.
And they're afraid of it. The
They're afraid of
practitioners
it.
are afraid of it. That's right. That's right.
They're afraid of it and they don't know how to do it. And there are so many men walking around with either undiagnosed hypothyroidism or damn hypothyroidism, and they're on T4 monotherapy. T4 monotherapy is like Testagel or pellets. It's crap. It's almost as good as nothing. The thing that breaks my heart is when guys say, "Oh, I had my thyroid removed and now I'm on 100 micrograms of T4 and I'm obese." It's like, well, you didn't have much of a chance.
No.
So thyroid optimization gets a bad rap because a lot of the time people get put on T4 monotherapy, which is useless or it can make problems worse. And yes, there are outliers that do great with T4
That's right.
monotherapy.
That's right.
But the vast majority of people need T3 and T4, and natural desiccated thyroid just works better. I used to think, and I was wrong, and I will eat my words on this. This is another one of those you can say I told you so moments, because 100% true is T3, T4. If you have the equivalent dose of NDT as synthetic T3, T4, it doesn't work as well as the NDT does.
That's right.
1 in 10 people won't tolerate NDT for some weird reason, but the vast majority of people do much better on NDT. I've had guys be on the equivalent, like let's say a 2-grain equivalent dose of T3, T4, and they swap to NDT and it blows the levels through the roof. Like it's a much better medication. So yeah, when it comes to thyroid, I like to think of thyroid as putting the wind in the sails of TRT. Thyroid is responsible for your metabolism. It's your engine. I talk about thyroid being the furnace that sits in your torso. And when thyroid function is low, it's like when people go, "Oh, I've just got a slow metabolism." You've got hypothyroidism. Or when you see those, like I used to know people when I was young who would just eat everything and they'd stay stick thin. I've recently run their lab work and they've naturally got a TSH of like 0.4 and a free T3 above the reference range. They're just those outliers. So you want to have optimal thyroid function, one, because food is wonderful and being able to eat more nutritious food is wonderful for you. The more good quality, emphasis on good quality, the more good quality food you put into your body, the more nutrients that you can assimilate and the more powerful of a vessel you can build. It's like basically it's like being a more powerful car and going faster. It feels better to be alive when you've got good thyroid function. When you're low in thyroid, everything feels like too much effort, and the body constantly has to kick into adrenal hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, to get things done, like a dirty backup fuel source, because your body has to kick into fight or flight just to do basic day-to-day stuff. Thyroid is not amphetamine, like you said before. Thyroid's not like you're sitting down and being like, "Oh, I just want to go take on the world now."
Right.
But what people do notice when they put the thyroid in is they go, "Oh, now doing that cardio and abs at the end of my workout, it doesn't feel like a chore anymore. I kind of look forward to it. Now I kind of want to go to the gym for as long as I can rather than leave as early as possible. Now, all of a sudden, when I go for a walk, it doesn't feel, I'm not always checking to make sure I've been going for long enough. I just want to keep going because it feels good to move and be alive."
That's right.
And I like to say to people that, again, going back to the car thing, if you were a car that had an engine that's too small for the vehicle, which is what hypothyroidism is, you can still go down to the shops to get milk and bread. You can still get from A to B, but it's going to feel terrible to drive.
Right.
But if you've got a sports car with a souped up engine and it feels really good to drive it, not only is that experience going to be better, but you're more likely going to go for a joyride. So in your spare time, you're more likely going to go and exercise and get off the couch and actually go and do the things that you need to do to achieve your goals. And that's what I love about thyroid so much. It's that it's giving people the energy that they need to put the testosterone and the other hormones to use.
That's right.
And the other thing that we haven't spoken about this before. I recently did a lecture on maybe this term exists. I coined it subclinical Hashimoto's. And this is where people have got elevated Hashimoto's enzymes that are not above range, but they've got symptoms of hypothyroidism, even when their thyroid panel looks okay. And these people benefit immensely. And these are often the guys who are they're incomplete from their TRT alone, and they're 25, 26 years old, and they benefit from just boosting the thyroid up. Even if it's only 30 to 60 milligrams of NDT, they do wonderfully with it. So it's so important that people, even if if you're just going into this and you're wanting to look at your hormones, get a comprehensive thyroid panel and look at your symptoms, and don't overlook it and go, oh, I've got a little bit of Hashimoto's now, but let's wait until I put on another 20 kilos of body fat and become insulin resistant before I fix the hypothyroidism. It's nonsense. As we said before, the wheels are going to fly off, so service it now.
Or even better yet, Dave, I only need testosterone because my testosterone levels are normal, but they're not optimal. They're on the low normal, and my thyroids are totally normal. They're normal. But your thyroid is no more optimal than your testosterone. In fact, when you really look at it, your free T3 is almost tanked. It looks worse than your testosterone does. Once again, men can buy into testosterone and start it with normal levels and realize that, hey, I can still be symptomatic with normal levels of testosterone and benefit from testosterone. They have a hard time applying that to thyroid. Okay. And so when Dave mentions NDT, he's talking about natural desiccated thyroid. And when we talk about T4, only that's a synthetic T4, and it's T4 only. Desiccated thyroid is a mixture of T3 and T4. It's 38 micrograms of T4 to 9 micrograms of T3. So you're getting both. The problem with taking T4 by itself for many people, as Dave has alluded to, is that T4 is not the active component of thyroid. It's free T3. T4 has to be converted at the cellular level to exert the benefits of thyroid. And for those people that take T4, you're going to kind of decrease your own thyroid's production of T3 and T4. Thyroid produces, just for lack of argument's sake, 75% T4, 25% T3. So your thyroid typically is going to produce both, but 75% T4, 25% T3. When you take T4 by itself, you're going to shut down that production of T3. Okay. And what will happen if you're not converting your T4 adequately at the cellular level, you may feel worse because now you have no T3 and you're not converting adequately. When we take desiccated thyroid, we're taking both T4 and T3. So, we're getting our T4 to be converted, and we're also getting our T3 along with it so that we're never kind of devoid of T3. So those are the difference between those two. The problem that the family physician has with it is that when they see us raise thyroid levels, when you take thyroid, what's going to happen is when you look at your thyroid panel, there's something called a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. That's basically your little thermostat. The bigger that number, that's your body saying, I need more thyroid. The lower that number is your body saying, I don't need to produce any. I do not need to tell my body to produce any more thyroid because I've got enough. Free T3 will go up when you take desiccated thyroid. Now, when you take T4, that may not always happen, as Dave's alluded to, but that's the goal, is to increase free T3. That's really what we're looking at. So when you take it, what's going to happen to your labs when you take thyroid is when somebody just looks at those labs, they're going to think you're hyperthyroid. It makes you look like you've got hyperthyroidism. Now, hyperthyroidism is Graves' disease. At baseline, they have a low TSH, they have a high free T3, high T4, so they have a lot of thyroid hormone. But here's the issue. Graves' disease is an autoimmune disease. It has an autoimmune component that does the damage. Yes, it causes cardiac abnormalities like AFib and other issues, but the literature is very clear on this. Taking thyroid in somebody that is hypothyroid or has subclinically Hashimoto's or subclinical hypothyroidism, when they take thyroid and their labs move, as we said, TSH goes down, T3 goes up, it does not cause the same sequela as having Graves' disease or hyperthyroidism. It does not cause those adverse effects because there's no autoimmune component. And there's plenty of data out there to show you that. There's some great papers written by Tomas Kelly on this very topic. And so he's even written a book on it. So I'd recommend that, but the family doctors, I was taught that when you take thyroid, you're going to cause somebody to be hyperthyroid. Now, when you take thyroid, yes, is it going to increase your heart rate a little bit? Yeah. Is it going to make you feel warmer? Dave's already alluded to that. It increases thermogenesis. It increases your metabolism. Yes, you're going to feel warmer. Yes, it's going to increase your heart rate. There's no harm in that whatsoever. But if you're one of those individuals that's extremely sensitive to it, and you feel like you have an excessive heart rate, or feel like you're having palpitations, or you're having excessive sweating or heat intolerance, you can simply just lower your dose to resolve those symptoms. Once again, it's always a balancing act between raising levels to resolve symptoms and avoiding any unwanted side effects. And sometimes it's just lowering the dose and finding that midway point for you. So anything you want to add to that there, Dave?
Exactly what you said about the TSH being a signal for the body wanting more thyroid. So I like to use the analogy. Usually I have a glass in front of me, but now I've just got the bottle. So it's kind of like if you're in a restaurant, basically the glass of water you have is like the T3, And then this bottle is you signaling to the waiter to say, hey, give me more water. That's the TSH. So what you want is you want a full glass and you want you to shut up. And that means that TSH is generally under 1, close to 0.5, if not lower,
Mhm.
under 1. And people think, oh, that's great. No, when you see people who are 23, 24, who are athletes with optimal thyroid function, they generally have a TSH of like 0.4, 0.5, and they have a T3 often above the reference range. And I tell them, I go, this is rare, this is optimal, and this is what we aim for with hormone replacement. Now, you find me a 50-year-old who's got a natural thyroid panel looking like that, and I tell you found Bigfoot. They don't exist. It would, especially if they have low testosterone as well, be very unlikely. So when it comes to the thyroid, if that TSH is elevated to varying degrees, your body is signaling that it wants more T3 at the receptor level.
Mhm.
And the problem is that there's a whole bunch of chronic inflammatory conditions, such as insulin resistance, which is this vicious cycle, right?
Right.
Because insulin resistance reduces thyroid function, which slows your metabolism, which makes it worse. The body gets stuck in these vicious cycles, and this is where this interventional, hormone replacement therapy can break these vicious cycles so that people can get their health back, which is why it's such a cool topic. But if your body is signaling that it needs more needs more T3 at the receptor level, that means that your metabolism is suboptimal. And if your metabolism is suboptimal, it feels better to have an optimal metabolism. You have more energy to do the things that you need to do to look after yourself better. People make bad decisions when they're stressed because they go for the easy path. So the vast majority of people, even the vast majority of guys under 30, maybe not so much, maybe if we're talking over 50, it would be 99% of guys would benefit from thyroid. In terms of under 30, I would still say 60 to 70% of guys would benefit from at least some thyroid. You do see the optimal guys every now and then, but you see a couple of them a week. The vast
Right.
majority of younger guys, you see a bit of an elevation in
Right.
TSH, and it just might mean that they could benefit from a little bit of thyroid. But the cool thing about thyroid, which you've spoken about before, is that yes, this TSH feedback loop is active, but we've got a lot of research to show that people can withdraw thyroid medication after years, and their natural production comes right back.
Comes right
So
back. You'd die if it didn't. I mean, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing as well when it comes to this Graves and the hyperthyroid thing is that like, yeah, so when someone has Graves' disease, it's got that autoimmune component. It just means that the waiter's there just pouring that water nonstop. That feedback loop is gone.
Right.
And that's why it's so dangerous. If you take a little bit too much thyroid, your body's natural production will just compensate by lowering. But I don't know about you, but I have never found that someone continues to take medication that makes them hyperthyroid. It's like coffee. There's a certain amount of coffee that you drink in a day and you go, I'm not going to have any more. If your dose of thyroid is too high, you'll stop taking it before you end up in hospital.
Exactly. Well, you've given out a lot of pearls of wisdom. Let's back up to some a really excellent point that you made. Is that look, these young athletes that have beautiful thyroid panels, everyone needs to understand that our normal range for thyroid is not for a group of healthy people. It's the average of the population that you see around you. A lot of times it's made from a captive population, such as those in hospitals or clinics. So the point is that when a man says, well, look, my free T3 is normal, it's 2.6. Well, the normal range is 2.2 to 4.4 in some labs, and I'm like, but okay, it's 2.6, which is at the bottom of the normal range for a group of sick people. Is that where you really want to be? So if Dave and I were to be able to take these athletes that he's speaking of and just get our normal ranges from them, it would be a much different normal range. And that's what people need to understand. People don't want doctors paying attention to labs and normal, but they themselves can't break away from looking at labs themselves, if you know what I mean. It's kind of a catch-22 for them. They'll once again, they can understand testosterone to some degree, but when it comes to the other hormones, they just can't seem to make that next step to understand that it's just like treating testosterone. And when we're treating thyroid, it's just like testosterone. We're treating really free testosterone levels, and for thyroid, it's about those free T3 levels. And yes, a suppressed TSH has never caused harm. It's the free T3 level that correlates best with clinical improvement, not TSH level. My TSH, for instance, Dave, last time it was tested, is 0.007. And you'll see many people with a suppressed TSH, they feel great, they feel wonderful. So the takeaways here is the normal range is not for healthy people. If we got them from the athletes, like Dave said, we'd have a much different range. And that's the key there. And following free T3 and the fact that taking thyroid will not cause you to have hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease. Okay. You can have symptoms of too much, just like you can with testosterone. You lower the dose. Remember, I try to point this out to people all the time. Thyroid's been used for over 100 years. I think the first use of it was in the UK around 1891. They used desiccated thyroid. There were no thyroid labs up until the 1970s, just like there were no testosterone labs until the 1970s, and testosterone was first used in 1935, the mid-1930s. So for decades upon decades upon decades, we have been treating men with testosterone and thyroid with no labs, and it caused no harm. Think about that for a minute. They literally treated their symptoms. If they had symptoms of too much, they lowered the dose. Symptoms of little, they raised the dose. That was a better way to treat. Now, clinicians, for efficiency, will just look at a piece of paper, they'll literally ignore the symptoms or give you a medication for those symptoms and say you don't need it because your levels are normal. Nothing could be further from the truth with hormones. That's not how hormones work.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And you'll get a kick out of this. So in Australia, if you and we talk about the importance of, so in Australia we have something called like Medicare, which is like the government subsidized health program. So if you as a doctor order a thyroid panel for TSH, T3, and T4, right, and you specify that you want that, if TSH comes back below 4.5, they won't run T3, T4. They'll say no, your thyroid's normal.
Yep.
And that, it drives me up. One, we just get it all done privately because it's not expensive, and you have to get private care these days to get good care. But the amount of people who are walking into their doctor's office with hypothyroid symptoms, who are getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, adrenal fatigue, or just depression and anxiety would be astronomical. And it's just going undetected. Or even when the doctor does get a subclinical hypothyroid lab back that's obviously that, they'll go, oh, it's within range. You're just depressed. Here's your SSRI.
That's right. That's exactly how it works. That's exactly how it works. And people need to understand, why has it become so lab centric? Because in order to really treat people like we do, you have to sit down with them and you talk to them, and it's going to take longer than 6 or 10 minutes, which is the average follow-up time in America for a family doctor to see someone. It's just more efficient for them to look at a piece of paper, see that it's normal, tell you they don't need it, and then just go write a script for the symptoms that you're having. It's just the way the medical system is set up. Okay. It's not optimal in any way, shape, or form. We all know that. I never would believe I'd be talking about this, 20 years ago when I was a good little soldier in that system, but now I understand the shortcomings.